Hello everyone and welcome to Variable Scoping. By the end of this lesson, I hope that each and every one of you will be able to put things on the correct screen. Identify in-scope variables and describe scope. So, all right, let's talk about objective number one. Identifying in-scope variables. So the biggest mistake that I'm seeing on people's scoping work is that if we think of scope in terms of like nested boxes, which is a reasonable enough way to do it, if I've got a variable there, I can see it here and here, no problem. If I have a variable here, I can see it there. I cannot see it there. And if I have a variable here, I can't see it anywhere but this scope. So that's like the first part of this. The next part of it is that if I have a variable after that, A is in scope for D. D is not in scope for A. It still goes top to bottom. If I have E here, E can see B, can also see D and A. B can't see E because it's defined after it. So if we put this in like actual, if I was going to draw out this scope, or sorry, write it out in like actual code, might look something like this. Const A equals 1, const D equals 2, and then maybe I have some function scope. I've got const B equals 2, const E, oops. Let's make that 4, 2, 5. And then let's say I put a function inside of this function. Indent that a little more. Okay. When I'm defining A, nothing else is in scope. When I'm defining D, A is in scope. When I'm defining B, A and D are in scope. E is not. When I'm defining E, B is in scope, D is in scope, A is in scope. When I'm defining C, E, B, D, and A are all in scope. And what in scope means is I can use them. I could make D 4 plus A. That's totally legal. I could make this 2 plus D plus A. If I try to put E in there too, it's going to break because E is undefined right now. That could be 5 plus B plus D plus A. That's fine. Can't do C though. C is inside of a different scope. Doesn't work. This could be E plus B plus D plus A. That's my explanation. Ask me some questions about it.
Okay, here's my question. Earlier we talked about, or I guess the last time we talked about variable scoping, I asked the question, since it's out of scope, could you not use the same variable twice? So like
Yes.
you could say const a equals 1, and then within like another function, you could say a equals 7.
Yes.
So what if you say const a equals 1, and then
Mm-hmm.
in the function you defined a equals 7, and then you at the bottom of your function ask it to return a? Which
Yeah.
value is it going to return? Is it going to return the 1 or the 7?
Awesome. So I'm going to put this over to the side, but um, this is a spot on question. All right, so that's the thing that I just drew. If I what Chris is talking about is shadowing. So I'm going to call this. So if I shadow something in this inner scope, I can redefine A. I can say const A equals 7. And what happens there is that here and here, I'm referring to this A that I defined in scope. I actually can't even access, and same thing over here. It's like this one casts a shadow over the other one so you can't see it anymore. Which also means you can't access it. If I want this value up here, I can't use it inside of any of these scopes because I've shadowed it. Now, if I did that a little bit differently, if I did this as, instead of redeclaring the variable, I can reassign it. If I loosen that up to let. Now I'm still talking about that value. If I reassign that down there and this function gets called, then like A is going to be 7 down here. If that function gets called. More questions about that? Chris, does that make a little bit more sense?
Yeah, so const means it's like a hard assignment. Like it's gonna, like within the function, that's now gonna take over it. But if you start with let instead, like at the very top, instead of const a equals 1, um, I don't
You're
know. I might need to run through
okay.
it again.
Okay, because you're almost there. The big deal was that I redeclared the variable. That's a variable assignment. No big deal. I just changed the one I already had. That is a redeclaration. I said, give me a brand new variable called A. But since I'm in a new scope, like that's not an error or anything. I can redeclare a variable that's already in scope, but now I can't access this one anymore. Inside of this scope, at least. You can still see it out here.
That was my question there. It's like once it's all said and done, you call a at the end of it. Okay.
And that's because you can't see into scopes. And this outer scope has no idea what's happening inside of this function. Not its business. If I do
If you had a
that, go ahead.
if you had another variable at the bottom that didn't have a control structure, would it be able to see in the other things, or would it just be
Oh,
hanging out there on its own?
what a great question. So if I'm on the other side of this, I do let f equal 4, I could, or sorry, that would be 5, 6, 6. If I have that, I can see D and A, these up here. I can't see inside of any of these function scopes over here. I can't see B, I can't see E, I can't see C. I can't see this version of A. I can only see this one. So to bring this back to the boxes, that's putting like F down here. I can see D, I can see A, can't see inside of these nested scopes.
And then so for this example we see in the blue box, F would only contain itself in its scope, right? Because A and D are those higher order properties.
No, it can see this because they came before them in the same scope. So over here.
Oh, so it's the opposite. Okay.
Yeah. I can see this, I can see this. I can't see into any of these. But A, D, and F are all part of the same scope. And since these come later, they can see the things that came before them. What I couldn't do is see F up here. If I try to console log F there, that's undefined.
So it has to come after it for it to see it?
Bingo.
Okay.
And what if we were asking what's the scope of some function? You know, the entirety of that would be, my example looks a little different, but that would be B, E, and then, wait,
So
B, D, E.
the things that are contained in some function are A, B, E, C, A. Like all of these are kind of contained in here. The stuff that's visible, which is how we usually talk about scope, stuff that's visible to the sum function scope is A and D. I can use A and D all day long in here. Can't use F.
And everything within the function is also visible to it naturally, but
In order. So
right.
like
Okay.
A can't see B and E, B can see A, can't see E, E can see A and B.
So just one of the questions has which variables are in scope when A is assigned.
Mm-hmm.
Is that saying from the perspective of A, what can it see, or is it saying what?
Yes.
Okay.
So the things that A can see are, it actually technically could see the old A, and D. It's after this that this A is referring to this one. Let's go back to the simpler one. All right, so over here, when I assign B, D and A are in scope. That's why I can use them here. E isn't in scope. If I try to put E in this also, E is undefined because it doesn't get defined until the next line. But at the time that this is being assigned, D and A are in scope.
So in that example, if we were asked if A, like if A was assigned, what would be in scope for it, none of them would be in scope for it.
Correct. No other variables are in scope when this is being assigned. Also, these are functions. They don't have to be. It doesn't matter what they are. It just needs to be something that makes scope. So it could be if true, if true. Scope works the exact same way. Ask me more questions about scope.
A lot of answers to resubmit.
You're telling me. So, all right, let's do some real world stuff. Let's look at some real code. Let's see if I can find one that's a little less busy. Maybe, let me go poking around. Perfect. All right. I'm going to throw a question up in inbox, but it's about what is visible at the time that this assignment occurs. So I'm going to hop over to inbox. What variables are in scope when image URL is assigned? All right, prompt is up. What's in scope when this happens?
Do you want us to just put the line numbers?
Names of the variables.
Names.
We need a edit button for the inbox.
Okay, not bad. Nobody actually got them all. So the ones that most people got were these two. Spot on. Those are absolutely in scope. A couple of you picked up on this function being in scope. Also true. And like what's kind of neat about functions, this is what makes them declarations, not statements, is if I do this, that's also in scope. Show error is also in scope. It doesn't actually matter what order you put functions in. They're visible throughout the scopes. That's the one thing where order doesn't matter. But the one that no one got was that one. That parameter is also in scope. And as a clarification, image URL is not actually in scope when it's being assigned. And here's what I mean by that. If we tried to do image URL and concatenate it with that, image URL is undefined because we haven't actually executed this statement yet. So it's not accurate to say that that's in scope.
Can you explain why the show error is in scope?
Sure. Because it's a function declaration. And so function declarations, I can use show error up here if I want to. It's a concept called hoisting. Not a lot of languages have it even. JavaScript does though. Whenever you make a function by using the function keyword, there's some other ways to make functions, but if we do it with the function keyword, it basically takes all of the functions and like it's hoisting them up a flagpole. It's almost like it just copy and paste all of them up to the top of the file. Come on, man. Like it just copy and paste them all up to the top of the file, except all of them are at the top. It's like a magic trick. And there's even a lot of people that don't like that about JavaScript because a lot of other languages don't do that. So they want you to define every function before you use it. I think it's actually really handy to tuck all of your functions away so that you can do things like say, all right, I'm going to parse the response and show the Pokemon and then show the error, even though those are all defined below. Because this is the action in the app. This is what the app is doing. I don't want to look at the definition for the parse response function unless I need to debug it for some reason. Otherwise, that's the story of what's happening in this file. Lead with that, man.
So are the parameters of those functions also in scope, or is that something that we would pay attention to since?
Good question. Response is in scope here. It's not in scope anywhere else. Is in scope right here. Just that line. Pokemon data is in scope here. Throughout this. It is not in scope anywhere else. Error is in scope here. It is not, and error is in scope here. It is not in scope anywhere else.
So the function itself is in scope. As parameter is not in scope unless it's within its own container.
Right. I can't, and like that sort of makes sense. I can't if I'm calling show error and I pass in I don't know some error. Okay, so show error is in scope here. It's even in scope if I do it up here. But all the stuff that's inside of this, that's looking inside the box. I'm not allowed to do that. I can't see $ error. I can't see, I don't know that like this parameter is called error even. If that becomes fart, like nothing changes about how I call it. That's that difference between parameters and arguments. That's the boundary at which it goes from being an argument to a parameter. That's an argument. That's a parameter.
And so for the scope of image URL for the actual inbox answer, would fetch URL be considered within that scope?
Yeah, so this is all still in this same scope. It's not even a nested scope. So it can see URL because it's in its scope and it was defined before it. Here's another way to think of this. So I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and we're going to draw the scopes on it. All right, so our scopes I sometimes think of them like this, where you do like a little nubbin around the parameter. So that's a scope box. That's a scope box. That's a scope box. And then everything else is in another scope. So you could, I want to talk about global scopes in a sec, but you could sort of think of this green box as the global scope. It can't see inside of the yellow stuff. Yellow stuff can see anything that's in the green box that came before it. But those are the scopes that are here.
So functions, it doesn't matter what order they're in. They can be seen wherever. What if they're inside the yellow scope, for instance? Does that still not work?
Such a good question. If I define the function inside of another function, it goes to the top of that scope. So that's an insightful one. Let's say, this would break the code, but if I did this, that's legal JavaScript. Parse response can be used anywhere inside of here. I guess technically anywhere inside of here. Cannot use parse response here. Cannot use parse response here. Can be used anywhere inside here, though. Great question.
Kyle,
Yeah.
why could you not put the function sparse response in the show error function?
Oh, great question. So if I put this in here like this, so that creates a scoping problem. Who can tell us what it is?
Fetch
Well, if
can't use it?
Fetch can't use it. Where I'm using it is up here, which is an outer scope. So now I've hidden away parse response inside of show errors scope. Now this thing can't see it anymore.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. More questions? All right.
So Kyle, I was doing a little bit of reading after I asked my question about shadowing and scopes.
Yeah.
And I see that JavaScript used to use that var, which you had mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And now they use let and const. And it's
Correct.
kind of sounding like when you talked about the global scope, that's kind of what var was traditionally used as, whereas let and const are block scoped, or like when would you use let versus when would you use const, I guess is my
Sure.
question.
Well, let's talk about var first. So var died a pretty like unglamorous and I think a little unfair death 7 years ago. You still see it in old-timey code, but that's a really good sign that like that has not been updated in 7 years, whatever you're reading. So the difference between var and let is otherwise they work very similarly. Var is function scoped. Let and const are both block scoped. So for these, it wouldn't make any difference at all. Like if I made these var instead, all that stuff works the same. If all these are var, nothing is actually any different. They have this exact same scope that they would otherwise. The difference is, remember when I was saying like, it works the same with, if I turn those functions into ifs over here. Var works very differently with this. These don't create new scopes with var. They do with const and let. So really, any control structure that's wrapped with these curly braces creates a new scope with const and let. With var, it was only if it was a function. And so what that let you do was things like if, and then you have some condition. You could define a variable inside something like that and then use it out here. If you do that same thing with let, come on. Undefined. Because let is scoping this to the block. Var is scoping it to the nearest function. And if you're not in a function, then just the global scope. No other language works this way, so it was really confusing for a lot of people, so that's why they changed it.
So if you wanted to print whatever the let was, would you just do whatever the parameter is, or how would you do that now with let?
Ooh, good question. You would declare it outside so that it's in scope, and then assign it in here.
Okay, cool.
Now that's 2. Because inner scopes can modify outer scopes. That's not a problem. And that's exactly what that would look like. All right, so that's var. And if none of that made any sense to you, don't worry about it. Just don't use it. So let is a little different. Let and const are about reassignment. So I've declared this with const. So if I try to make const something else, that throws an error. And that's a good thing. I don't want to, like, so we've talked about shadowing. When you're shadowing things, it's really easy to accidentally change something in a higher scope and have no idea that you even did it. So when you do const as a default and you do something like that, it throws an error and goes, I don't think you meant to do that. And then if you go, no, it's cool. I totally meant to do that. I do want to reassign it. Then you loosen it up. If you do it the other way around, where you go, no, I use let for everything, and then you accidentally reassign something, you won't get an error. Hopefully you'll notice that your code broke. Maybe you don't. So it's like a safety measure that starting with the strictest thing and then only loosening it up if you do actually want to do something and you like see the error first, that's keeping your code, that's saving you hours debugging something. Because you could totally have something inside of one of these that does URL is google.com or whatever. And then this gets called. Meanwhile, you're using URL for something else in one of these. And now it's not the Poke API anymore. It's some other scope changed it. Just probably not what you wanted to do. So as a rule, start with const. If you need to loosen it up because you're reassigning it, loosen it up to let. Also, maybe just consider why you're reassigning to begin with. Like, variables are free. Just make another one.
That second reassigning that you just did for the URL, it would only be available within that scope, though, right? I mean,
no, you've changed it everywhere at that point.
They changed the higher order property. Yeah, never mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can reassign something in an inner scope, and then every other scope that uses that now has the new value.
And if it's done within a function, like everything can see it though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, if this parse response function that gets called, if I say, nope, URL is now google.com. In this next one, show Pokemon, now that's that. Because this scope changed it. Even though these scopes are adjacent, they can't see each other. So the way they communicate is this can see and modify a higher scope. So it does that. This other totally different scope can see the same scope, including any modification that the parse response function did.
And so all it is doing is retrieving line 2, which we changed in line 10.
Exactly.
Mm.
Ding, 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 ding. Ask me more scope questions. All right, so I'm going to ask a similar question to before. At the time that line 25, at the time this $ error is being assigned, what variables are in scope? When $ error is assigned. Everything that's in scope when $ error is being defined. Keep it coming. Need a couple more. Okay, so better than last time, still pretty rough. So couple things. At the time that $ error is being assigned, some of you still missed that error is in scope. More of you picked up on it though. Some of you correctly picked up that show Pokemon and parse response, those functions are in scope. I think just about everybody got that favorite Pokemon and the URL are in scope, just like before. All of this, not in scope. Why are these not in scope on line 25?
They're in a different colored box.
They're in, they're in a different box.
Yep.
Nice. Another thing, that's not in scope. Who can tell me why that's not in scope? Feels like it's kind of at the right level.
Is it because that's the final action of this entire sequence?
All this is a statement. Like only variables can be in scope. Expressions can't be in scope. Statements can't be in scope. Those sentences don't make any sense. Only variables can be in scope. They can be parameters. They can be declared like this. They can be whatever. But that's a statement. That's an expression. That's an expression. That's an expression. That's an expression. Those aren't in scope. Only variables.
So I think I might have gotten a... Oh, sorry, I'm hearing an echo. Let me fix that. Okay. So show Pokemon would be considered within scope, even though it doesn't return a value. That's where I confused myself.
Oh yeah, like even though it doesn't return a value, you can still invoke it. I can still say on this line, like, show Pokemon and then pass it in some Pokemon. That's allowed.
Okay.
If I tried to assign that to something, like Pokemon is gonna be undefined because it doesn't have a return value, but I can still do it.
Okay.
One thing a couple of you picked up on, which is true, but could confuse you down the road. Show error is also in scope inside of this function. I can do this. That's allowed. Did I just explode somebody's head?
Can you explain why that is allowed?
It wouldn't do any good here. It would just crash your computer if you did it. Because you'd call show error, and then it would, when it was trying to run that, it would call show error, which calls show error. So it's like a mirrors facing each other. But that is actually like a specific programming technique called recursion. Hey, that's one of our things from CLI. You can't do it that way, though. You have to pass something different into it every time. It's another way of doing looping, basically. But that would be something like, oh, fuck it, I'm not going to show you. But yes, the show error is technically in scope for show error. But I will not consider you wrong if you leave that out.
So
would we be wrong if we did show Pokemon, but we didn't do Pokemon data? Like we need to hit both of those?
So, well, correct, because over here, show Pokemon is in scope, but like Pokemon data is not in scope. Remember the nubbins?
Okay.
So.
But the error is because it's on that particular line that you're working within that block.
Yeah, I can see show Pokemon. I don't know what its parameters are. I can give it an argument. What it does with it after that is not my business.
For the function you're working on, the parameter for error, you mentioned that was
Yes.
in scope.
Correct.
So it's because, okay.
Because that's the scope that I'm in right now.
Okay.
I can see my own little nubbin. I can't see another scope's nubbin. I can see its name, though, because its name is part of the green box.
And for the function itself, the reason why we say that we can see this function is because what we're really pointing to, isn't it the result of some function that's available in some other scope? So
say that again.
For const error, the reason why we point to the name of the function and not, so we point to a function show Pokemon, but we don't point to Pokemon data because what we're actually talking about is the result of some Pokemon.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the API. It's the black box.
Right.
We can pass stuff into it. What happens inside the black box, it stays inside the black box. Not our business. What we care about is the output. And like in this case, this doesn't return anything. What it does is it like puts stuff on the screen or changes things that are on the screen. But this one returns something. And so, yeah, we could, like, response isn't in scope for us, but this return value would be if we were saying, like, parse response, some response, parsed response. So that's how we get the output of another scope, is that return keyword.
Thank you.
More questions?
And if we don't have a return value, and then you try to invoke or like, do what you just did to set it equal to, it won't return anything, right? It'll just be undefined or what? Gotcha.
A function that does not have a return value evaluates to undefined.
Okay. Just making sure. Thanks.
Other questions? Let's do a different one. Let's check out yeah. Okay, so same question as before. I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to do a slightly easier one. Let's do. No. Oh man, that is just butt. Oh, I was gonna say this is the most butt ugly code I've ever seen. Sloppy code is the name of the example. that tracks. What about? Oh, here's a good one. Oh no, that one's got those nested functions too. I'm trying to make it a little easier for you. Nope. take this one. No shit, that has higher order functions too. I swear, I'm just trying to make it easier for you. Oh, let's do one of the code analysis ones. Perfect. All right, is this the one from this morning? No, it's 10. Okay, so if we're right here, line 17, what is in scope? Everything that's in scope on that line. So I'm going to throw it in chat. All right, prompt is out. What variables are in scope there? All right, we are collectively riding the struggle bus pretty hard on this. So right here, correct answers are word from up here. Not word in words. That's not a variable. Word is a variable. Really should have put a let there. But even still, it works all the same. That's a variable. This is also a variable. We're getting it from right here. In fact, the reason that we can do this is that it's in scope. So word is in scope. Words is in scope. For is not in scope. For is not a variable. For is a control structure. It's a keyword. Words.reverse is also not in scope. Words.reverse is an expression. It evaluates to words, but that's an expression. This whole line is a statement. Words is a variable that's in scope. We declared it up here. We assigned it down there. String.split, that's an expression, not a variable. A lot of you missed reverse. Just because we're not using it in here, well, I guess we do right there. That's in scope. And then this parameter is in scope. Function is not in scope. Function's a keyword. It's not a variable. Now, like in a just world, this has a name. Some function or something, right? But the fact that it Uh-oh.
About 20 or
Recording
30
in
seconds.
progress.
Oh, I think he just finally dropped. Oh wait, no, he's here.
I'm back. How much got missed?
Kyle, you're
Everybody's
muted.
How much got missed?
A lot.
About 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds. That's nothing. All right. So,
You were telling us that string dot split
yeah.
was not. That's where you left off.
Okay, easy. So, this is an expression. It's not a variable. In this statement, like it is evaluating that expression and taking the result and storing it in this variable. So words is in scope. Reverse is in scope too. Some folks missed that one. String is our parameter. That's in scope. The function keyword, that's not a variable. That's a keyword. It's a control structure. Not in scope. So that's the right answer. Word, words, reverse, and string. Ask me some questions.
And some function isn't a
I'd buy
variable.
that. Like you're not in trouble for doing that one. That's that recursive thing. So you can call a function inside of itself. That's allowed.
So for reverse, it appears as though that it's within the scope of the function on line 11. Why is it available here?
Who can answer
within
that
the scope?
question? Super good question.
It's in the same box, isn't it? It's the same block.
Same bigger box.
Yeah.
So
In the
for-
same braces, which is where
Yeah.
I messed up, is I didn't notice it was in a brace.
Yeah.
I see it now.
4
Okay.
makes a block.
Thank you.
So I've got a new block there, but they're also all inside of this function block too.
I see now. Okay, cool.
More questions about that? And while I'm at it, thought I fixed that from this morning. There I go. Fixing typo. Oop, fix typo. Imperative. Present tense imperative. Fixed. All right. Let's look at another one. Beautiful. All right. Same question, same line even. What variables are in scope on line 17? Excellent job, Matt P. Excellent job, Sean. Nice work, Brad. Nice work, Scott. Keep them coming. Good job, Tiffany. Good job, Sarah. Cool. The correct answer A, B, and margin. That's it. What I saw a lot of was people thinking this expression is in scope. Expressions can't be in scope. I also saw a little bit of like these numbers. Values can't be in scope. Only variables. Variables are the only thing that can be in scope. A, B, and margin are our parameters here. Not margin can't be in scope. It's an expression. A is less than B minus margin. That's an expression, not a variable. A, B, and margin are only variables in scope. They came in through the parameters of the function. Ask me questions about that.
This is gonna be a dumb question, but I'm not getting it, so I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Yep,
The A, B, and margin in the function line, those are considered variables in this sense as opposed to parameters or a value?
Parameters are variables. Mind blown.
God. Okay, that makes it easier for me. Thank you.
I saw a couple people put the function in here too. This function is not in scope for kind of a tricky reason. Why isn't this function in scope inside of it? That recursive thing I was talking about, that actually doesn't apply here. Why?
Because we already have if loops going on.
Nope. Good guess.
Isn't function a keyword?
Function is a keyword. You're in the ballpark of why it's not in scope. It's like the function
There's no
keyword.
function in the function.
Nope, good guess.
Not a variable.
Function definitions are variables.
It's a statement.
Function declarations are not statements.
Because it hasn't been declared yet, because it contains all of that.
Ooh, almost.
Code and
Doesn't have a name.
Doesn't have a name.
Uh,
Something has to have a name to be in scope. Now, functions are not required to have names. And if you're wondering what the hell use is a function that can't be in scope and doesn't have a name, we'll get there. That's a question for another day. But it doesn't have a name, so it can't be in scope. How would you say what the thing that's in scope is? You can't, so it's not. If I say some function, all of a sudden the sum function is in scope in here also, technically. Again, I'm not going to beat anybody up about not getting recursive functions on day 4 of programming. That's kind of like a day last thing that you get. More questions about scope? One more before we break for lunch. I got a crush on line 17. I am going to fix my syntax on that though. Fix typo. Okay, so same question. What is in scope on line 17? Prompt is out. Much better answers. Keep them coming. Couple more. Missing a couple. All right, I don't know why I'm missing like 5 of these, but moving on. So a lot of you got this right. Correct answer is character is in scope. It's from right here. New character is in scope. It's right there. String is in scope. Came from the parameter. And answer is in scope. Was defined up here. Character in string, that's not in scope. That's not a variable. That's a like control structure thing with 2 variables. Character and string are different variables. Dot is not in scope. It's a value, not a variable. This is not in scope. That's a operator. The parentheses are not in scope. They're part of an expression. Just this. Character, new character, string, answer. Those are the variables that are in scope. Questions?
I got one more question. I got 2 of the 4.
Okay.
I didn't get new character and I didn't get answer.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the new character one because looking back on it, I might just be dumb because it came after the very clearly a variable with new character there. The answer one I'm a little less clear on. Is that because it's also after let, even though it's got? Well, let me think about this for a second. Hold on. No, never mind. I'm just dumb. Ignore me.
You're not dumb. You're new. Let's take a like. This is the last thing we'll do. I'll draw the boxes on this. So if I try to figure out where the scopes are in this, look for the braces, and then you just got to figure out, are they objects or are they scopes, blocks? All right, so that's a scope. This one right here. That's a scope. And then there's a little nubbin. That's a scope. Inners can see outers, outers can't see inners. So in the red box, we can't see character. We can see string, it was our parameter. It came in through our scope. Cool, last questions before we break?
And the green box can only see the parameters that are above it, even though you can't see the answer below it, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
inside here, like, if this answer were up here somehow, yeah, you could totally see that. Cannot see answer inside the green box because it's later.
But it can see the answer on line 2, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it can. That's a good point. It can see answer up here. Whatever's being done to it there, that change isn't in scope. Whatever answer's new value is. But yeah, it can see that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was getting it.
You got it. Sorry, that was confusing. Other questions about scope? So I have a hunch we're not done talking about this one. 'Cause we're still pretty damn shaky on that collectively, which is fine. This is not a simple issue, but it is a really critical one. So we'll take whatever time we need to on it, because like this is probably the most important skill in your debugging toolbox, is figuring out, all right, well, what was in scope at the time that this thing happened? That's something we want to be pretty fast at. So let's take as much time as we need on it. Awesome. Have a good lunch. Use the queue, and I will do a study hall at 3 o'clock. See you then.